Good afternoon, Prof. Rogayah. We are having issues in hearing to your voice, Prof. Rogayah. Yeah.
Hello, Assalamualaikum.
Salam.
Mr. Shafiq.
Yes, I am Shafiq. Can you hear me well, Prof?
Yes, I can. With my
Alhamdulillah.
headphone. Just now without the headphone, couldn't hear.
Okay, no problem. Thank you so very much, Prof. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and happy Tuesday afternoon, everyone. I am Muhammad Shafiq Yasha from Academy of Language Studies, Universiti Teknologi Malaysia, Perak Branch, and I will be accompanying all of you as the moderator for today's talk. And I'm so grateful to welcome all of you to this session. And I hope that your day has been wonderful, inshallah. And thanks so very much for everyone once again for joining us this afternoon for this special talk on the future of psycholinguistics research in Malaysia, an issue that deserves another look, especially in this pandemic era. First thing first, I would like to call upon Ustaz Ahmad Sadudin Wahab to grace our afternoon.
Excuse me, Mr. Shafiq, I think you're on mute.
I'm mute.
No, you can hear you.
Right. All right. So,
Yeah, we can hear you clearly.
All right. Thank you so very much. That's assuring. All right. Ustaz, are you in, Ustaz?
Yeah, ada.
Okay, Ustaz, can you please grace our afternoon with prayers? Thank you very much, Ustaz.
Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulil Amin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Bismillahilladzi la yadurru ma'asmihi syai'un fil ardi wa la fis sama' wa huwas samiul alim. Dengan keagungan namamu ya Allah yang tidak memberi kemudaratan suatu pun di bumi dan di langit melainkan dengan kudrat dan iradatmu. Allahumma inna nas'aluka ridhakal jannah wa na'udzu bika min sakhatika wan nar. Allahumma innaka 'afuwun karimun tuhibbul 'afwa fa'fu 'anna wa 'an walidina wa 'an jami'il muslimina wal muslimat al ahya'i minhum wal amwat bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin. Allahumma inna nas'aluka 'ilman nafi'a wa rizqan tayyiban mubaraka wa 'amalan salihan mutaqabbala. Ya Allah, kami mohon daripadamu akan ilmu yang bermanfaat, rezeki yang baik, lagi diberkati, dan amalan soleh yang diterima oleh. Allahumma yassir umurana wa la tu'assir wa tammim bi khair. Ya Allah, pemudahkanlah urusan kami di petang hari yang mulia ini dan pada hari-hari mendatang. Janganlah engkau beri kesukaran dalam urusan kami dan sempurnakanlah urusan kami dengan apa jua kebaikan. Allahumma ya munawwiral qulubi wal uqul, nawwir qulubana wa uqulana bi nuri ilmika wa hikmatik. Ya Allah, Tuhan yang menerangi hati-hati dan akal kami. Terangilah hati-hati dan akal kami dengan ilmu dan hikmah darimu. Engkau berilah kekuatan dan ilham kepada kami dalam usaha menghasilkan bahan-bahan kajian dan penerbitan ilmiah yang berkualiti serta memberi manfaat kepada ummah dan negara. Allahumma ja'al jam'ana hadha jam'an marhuma wa tafarruqana min ba'dihi tafarruqan ma'suma wa la taj'al fina wa la ma'ana syaqiyyan wa la mahruman wa la matruda. Ya Allah, engkau jadikanlah pertemuan kami ini dirahmati, perpisahan kami diawasi, dan janganlah engkau jadikan dalam kalangan kami orang yang berduka serta dijauhi dari rahmat-Mu. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah wa fil akhirati hasanah wa qina adzaban nar. Wa sallallahu ala khairi khalqihi Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.
Amin. Thank you so very much, Ustaz, for gracing our afternoon with prayers. God knows this is how much we need prayers in these challenging times. All right, moving right along with our talk this afternoon. It is now my pleasure to introduce our honorable speaker this afternoon, Prof. Dr. Rogayah A Razak from the Department of Postgraduate Studies, Faculty of Education, Language and Psychology, SEGi University. Professor Rogayah graduated from Universiti Science Malaysia in 1995 with a PhD in linguistics. Started her illustrious academic career as a senior lecturer in Universiti Science Malaysia in 1986 before moving to Universiti Malaya in 1997 in the same position. She later made another career move to Universiti Kebangsaan Malaysian as an associate professor in the year 2000. 31 years forward, she's now a professor in SEGi University Malaysia since March last year. And there are many milestones throughout her career as an academician that I'm thrilled to share with all of you today. Among others, she was awarded the Distinguished Fulbright Visiting Scholar Award from the United States Department of State in January to May 2006 at the Department of Speech and Hearing, Washington State University, Spokane, Washington, United States of America. Apart from that, she was the founder of the Clinical Linguistics Postgraduate Program in UTM, which is the third program of its kind in Malaysia and Southeast Asia region, which had its first intake in 2007. In addition, she authored and commercialized the first standardized local test, the Malay Preschool Language Assessment Tool in Malaysia, which could be used to screen and diagnose a child at risk of language delay and disorders. Not only that, she's instrumental in the setting up of Community Tutor, a new platform for children with cochlear implants. Arenas where parents, professionals, and the community itself could interact with each other. How very inspiring, right? Before we invite our speaker to start the talk, if you have any questions on today's topic, do ask them at the end of the session. And you can just switch on your microphone, show us your lovely face to do so later, inshallah. And you can also use our chat box for that purpose. And do keep the conversation going in our chat box throughout the session, and selected comments will be read by the end of the session. Also, the link for the attendance will be posted in our chat box in about 15 minutes before the talk comes to an end, so do keep an eye on that. So without wasting any more time, let's warmly welcome Prof. Dr. Rogayah to start her talk on the future of psycholinguistics research in Malaysia this afternoon. Good afternoon, Dr. Prof. Assalamualaikum. I hope you are doing wonderfully this afternoon.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So I may start?
Yes, you may.
Yes. So basically, my background is I began with English lit education, masters in TESOL. So I was sent by Ministry of Education to do these 2 degrees with the vision of being an English teacher. But then USM proposed to me, scholarship to do my PhD actually. But I instead actually went to work first before I did my PhD. So on my at my PhD level, I did Malay linguistics, which is I looked at WH questions in Malay. So I was from the English background, literature background, TESOL, and then I did questions in Malay, which is theoretical. Okay, so then because of some family concerns, my husband moved to Lebah Kelang. I actually moved to UM. Yeah. So one fateful day, I presented at a conference, and the founder of the speech science program in UKM came up to me and asked a question or two, and then said, "Would you consider coming over to UKM?" So that's how I started with UKM in clinical linguistics, I call it. So in my career of 35 years, I had to retool myself, especially for the last leg of the service with the government. So I learned about clinical linguistics, and then you learn on the job, and you know what is required of you, and that's how my work has expanded this way. You'll be asking, why is she, how can she do a diagnostic tool if she's not a clinician? So I mean, Alhamdulillah, I was in a very special place because it was in speech science, Faculty of Health Science UKM, where they train speech therapists. Yeah. So I had the opportunity to work together with audiologists, speech pathologists, and all the other professionals, health professionals in my faculty, optometry, diagnostic, and stuff. So that's how my work has been shaped. So today I was invited for this talk to give um, um, a picture of what is psycholinguistic studies have been in Malaysia, and of course we want to look into the future. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Okay, let me share. Can you see my screen, Cik Shafiq?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right. Okay, so I'm from SEGi University since March last year. After I retired from UKM, I joined Faculty of Education, Language and Psychology, SEGi University. So I'm there now. All right. So basically, the outline of my talk is I'm going to talk about what is psycholinguistic, the types of theories and the type of studies. And then we're going to look at psycholinguistics studies in Malaysia and some emerging trends in recent years, like maybe less than 10 years. People have been going online experimental tasks. So before this, we were doing offline. Now it's more online. So as a refresher, for our basis of our discussion, psycholinguistics basically is a combination between psychology and linguistics. So it is a subdiscipline which are also interrelated with other fields. Yeah. So it includes psychological factors and neurobiological factors. So as a field of its own, it has diverse, or it connects to or meets with other fields like connective psychology, neuroscience, applied linguistics. When we say applied linguistics, it is referring to the application of analysis to clinical data. Yeah, it's not the teaching part of applied linguistics, and also information theory, artificial intelligence, for example. So as you can see, it has connection to all aspects of life. Yeah. So semiotics, logics, sociology, because we are all social beings in the community, and medicine, neurology, speech science. So this is where people with communication disorders, for example, we will see people with aphasia. Aphasia is a kind of condition where you have trauma to the brain, and it affects your language side of the brain, and then it connects to imaging and stuff. Yeah, so it's very interesting area to be in. And the topics in psycholinguistics, also a refresher for some of you. We look at language acquisition in the native language. Very important to know how children acquire language, because knowing how children acquire language, we will be able to see how complex the language system is, and how a miracle language acquisition is, because by the time the child is 5 years old, he has fully acquired the native language without any instruction. He doesn't have to go to school, he doesn't have to memorize, but he does it on his own. And we have theories for that too. Yeah. So second language acquisition, we look at how is it that people learning a second language. So English as a second language, or English as a third language, or English as a foreign language. Why is it that it's easier for children compared to adults? And why is it that non-native speakers have trouble using a second language or a third language? Certain phonemes, let's say, certain speakers have difficulty pronouncing R, so they pronounce L. So these are the transfer issues from the first language to the second language or to the subsequent language. We also talk about speech perception. So speech perception deals with how humans comprehend and process speech in real time. So it is interesting to see how people perceive language. Yeah, and then neurolinguistics is focusing on the brain, the physiological reaction associated with the language, and they use imaging, magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI, yeah, to look at the brain activities when we are using language or when we are comprehending language. Also, we talk about reading literacy, reading and writing skills, because that is connected to children and adults in everyday life. We reading and writing is such a big part of our lives. Yeah? Why adults? Because we have school age children who are learning reading and writing, and also sometimes when adults they have aphasia, trauma to the brain, they lose the reading and writing skills. So we want to look at that, and also of course we cannot but mention artificial intelligence in computer science. Okay, so for example, I'm now involved in an FRGS. Invited uh, to join the team, and the head principal investigator is a computer science person, and we're looking at biomarkers of children with dyslexia. Yeah, so yeah, so when you look at psycholinguistic theories, this is also a refresher course for many of us. We look at behaviorist theory, how nurture versus nature. Um, so according to the behaviorist theory, language learners are sensitive to reinforcement and social reaction to their verbal behavior. B.F. Skinner, who is the proponent of this theory, is well known for his operant conditioning, which means that beliefs about nurturing and repeated reinforcement can strengthen or bring about a positive behavioral response in language learning, for example, or even in everyday lives. So, and this repeated reinforcement eventually condition a target behavior. Okay, so so this is we started with this, and then we move on to in 1957, yeah, when Noam Chomsky wrote his book, which actually revolutionized the psychology world, the linguistic world. So from a structuralist or in linguistic to innateness theory in linguistic by Noam Chomsky. From behaviorist in psychology becomes innateness in psychology. Yeah? So basically, Chomsky proposes that we all are born, every one of us are born into this world with an inborn or innate faculty for language acquisition, and it is biologically determined, meaning that we have all the templates in our brain, and what we need to do is to be exposed to the language for it to be triggered. So, for example, a Malay child being brought up by, let's say, a Chinese family, the child's templates will be triggered by the Chinese language, and therefore the child will learn will use Chinese. Yeah. The same thing, Chinese child brought up in a Malay family, the templates will be triggered by the language environment. Yeah? So yeah, so Chomsky attributes that to language acquisition device that we have with us at birth. Yeah. Okay, and then cognitive theory, Piaget, a very important theory, yeah, which actually, he says that all of us children go through these developmental stages, sensory motor, pre-operational, concrete operational, and formal operational stages. So, and these stages are constant across cultures, and they progress gradually as the child grows. Yeah, they are also driven by both biological and biological age and environmental factors. So Piaget believed that children take an active role in the learning process, acting just like little scientists as they perform experiments, make observation about the world, and learn about the world. So as kids interact with the world, they continually add new knowledge to their repertoire. Okay, and then a mix between the it's social interactions theory. It's a mix between structuralists and also psychologists and innateness. So it focuses on three areas. That is the cognitive approach to language acquisition, information processing approach or the information processing model, and then the social interaction approach of Vygotsky, social cultural theory. So this is basically saying that the child from birth is engaging in social interaction, which allows him to develop higher cognitive functions, namely language and thought. And Vygotsky, according to Vygotsky, social interaction plays an important role in the learning process, and he proposed the zone of proximal development, ZPD, where learners construct the new language through socially mediated interaction. So he gives this theory gives a different perspective when we compare to B.F. Skinner and Chomsky, which I think is very relevant. All right. Then after that, there is the usage-based theory. So I think in a sense, people are saying that, yeah, we can say that people are born with the ability to acquire language. They can be in the community, but usage is also very important. So when we say usage, we are looking at two kinds of situation where meaning is used. So the structure emerges from use, meaning in use represents an approach to the functional or semantic dimension of linguistic communication. The second one is structure emerges from use. So just now meaning from use, meaning is used, now structure emerges from use. And Tomasello in 2003 looked at the usage-based theory of language acquisition. And he says that children are equipped with two sets of cognitive skills, yeah, and which is intention reading or functional dimension and pattern reading, grammatical dimension. So it suggests that children initially build up their language to very concrete construction based on individual words or frames of utterances that they hear and they use, and they learn this to accumulate a certain language structure. Okay, so these are the theories that are commonly used in psycholinguistics. Just to give a foundation of what we're going to talk about after this. So I'm going to talk about psycholinguistic theories in Malaysia, studies in Malaysia. I'm going to talk about the early studies and then the current study. Yeah? So the early studies, I don't know whether you are familiar with Manggantar Simanjuntak. So Manggantar Simanjuntak was a PhD candidate in Universiti Kebangsaan Malaysia, and he produced his thesis in 1987. He's an Indonesian, yeah. So he carried out a longitudinal study looking at the various aspects of language acquisition of his 3 children, yeah, from 10 months to 3 years, 6 months old. He found that they start combining words at 2 years old following the holophrastic stage, and he uses pivot grammar. So if you look at if you look at the utterances and how he used pivot grammar, mami bayang, which is mami praise, back mami. So mami bayang is pivot, and then O is the object, yeah. Ampu, mbang, the place, the planes, the plane lights. Ali makan, please come and eat. So he said that even though at a very young age of 2 years old, children are already experimenting with the language, and then this is the very primitive structure of acquisition. Yeah? And then a study in 1999 by Tan Hock Tan, he did his master's in USM. This is his PhD study, but before master study, but before that he was already NRA to a big project by Prof. Mashudi Kadir. So Tan carried out an extensive longitudinal study on the acquisition of WH questions and yes/no questions among 5 children in Pulau Pinang between the ages of 18 and 48 months, 1 year and a half and 4 years, over a period of 2 years, 6 months. And data was collected from recordings of the language that the child uses in each visit that he makes. So every week every week he goes to the child's house and collected data for 2 years, 6 months. So imagine how much data he has, a big reservoir of data. So then parents were also asked to report when their child started using new question words. Yeah. So from his study, he found that the first WH word to appear was mana, where, apa, what, and siapa at 20 to 21 months for the 2 children, and between 26 and 30 months for the 3 children. This was followed by kenapa and macam mana. And then the last WH to be acquired but rarely used was berapa, about 3 years, about 3 years old. So further expansion of this study was he actually looked at the combination of WH word and a particle. So for example, dekat siapa, dengan mana, untuk apa, macam apa. So those are he find that was acquired later. Yeah, later. In terms of the yes/no questions, he said that the yes/no questions were preceded by the intonation. So children actually do intonation question first. Intonation question means the structure is a statement, but then the rising intonation. So and then they do yes/no, and then they do WH. Okay. And then another formal structure that they use in yes/no question is the modal auxiliary. They start doing boleh, as in bolehkah, boleh bolehkan. So this is a study that has been published, I think, twice in Journal Bahasa, Dewan Bahasa, but was not published as a book, which is very unfortunate because he has a lot of data. Okay, and then another study that is to me very it is a very good study. This is by Julia Long, Professor Julia Long, a professor in education, UKM. This was her PhD study. So she did in 1993, published in a book by Dewan Bahasa, a cross-sectional study on the development of affixes among preschool children. And she used a combination of direct observation of spontaneous language used by the children at home and preschool, and direct observation of a structured language task. She wanted to analyze the understanding and production. So understanding is the knowledge and production is the use of the verbal and nominal Malay affixes among 5 and 6-year-old Malay preschool children. And then she only took 12 children and their parents as subjects. So they found that in the study, they found that the preschool children were able to use the majority of verbal and nominal affixes, imbuhan kata kerja, imbuhan kata nama. Only a small group of affixes were not used. For example, loan prefixes, imbuhan pinjaman misalnya, and suffix pinjaman, juga sisipan. Sisipan is the infix. Affixation is very rare because it it's quite constant. There's no addition to er, el, and em. Those are the three infixes for Malay. Misalnya kalau kita ada serbak, dia jadi semerbak. So you dah masukkan infix kat situ. Yeah. So she also said that they were not able to master the affixes because they have not reached Piaget's concrete operational stage, which occurs about 7 years old. So according to her, morphological development in preschool children is ongoing, and they only reach the final year of the acquisition at 12 years old. So don't worry if your primary school kids don't get the fixation because it is acquired later. Okay, and then interestingly enough, she also showed that the highest used form of words are the bare verbals and bare nominals. Ini maksudnya kata kerja tu dengan kata nama tu dia tak ada imbuhan. Misalnya budak-budak akan kata abang gunting kertas, tak ada imbuhan di kata kerja tu ya. Mak dia masuk. Masuk ni tak ada imbuhan. Dia ada mainan. Ada ni tak ada imbuhan tapi kita nampak juga sebenarnya yang the fossilized affixation like mainan tu ada. They also use dia terjatuh dari basikal, dia baling dengan penyepit. So, penyepit tu ada imbuhan di situ. So it's very interesting study, still relevant until now. I really enjoyed reading this book. Silap saya pemerolehan morfologi di kalangan kanak-kanak Melayu. Okay, so then another study was by I did a study on. Encik Shafiq just now was telling you about my Malay preschool language assessment test. So this is a MPLAT, I call it. It is a standardized tool that can measure receptive language, which is receptive is understanding or knowledge. Expressive language, expressive is production, use of language. And also early literacy skills. And it has 6 subtests, which is the picture vocabulary, grammatical understanding. So picture vocabulary, we actually ask, show me layang-layang. So ada 4 gambar kat situ, budak akan tunjuk kepada layang-layang tu. Grammatical understanding is we give them the sentence, they point to the picture. Sentence repetition is where we read out the sentence, the child listens, and the child repeat after us. We want to know how many they retain and how many they drop. Yeah. Relational meaning means meaning of 2 objects, and referential meaning is meaning of the object, and then early literacy skills. So in a study that we did in 2010, preliminary results, we find that when we tested children from 4 years old to 6'11", the mean life utterance of the children increases by age. So as they grow older, the scores get higher. Yeah? So this indicated that it is statistically significant and indicated that the test as a whole is significantly related to chronological age and therefore is developmental in nature. This is a test that can be used for budak 4 tahun dan budak 5 tahun dan juga budak 6 tahun. Jadi dia terpulang kepada keupayaan budak itu ya. And this is a test which is used by speech therapists to diagnose whether the child is kalau dia 1.5 standard deviation from the mean at risk of language problem. Kalau dia 2 standard deviation below the mean, dia ada disorder, language disorder. So it can also be used as a screening. The kindi apa tu cikgu-cikgu tadika sebab dia ada frontliners of preschool. So if they can detect children who are at risk, then intervention can be given and these children can be helped. Yeah? But then when you have the children like at 7 or 8 years old. That's pretty late, yeah? Because by then the academic comes in and the child is at a loss. So the for intervention, the early that we can identify is better. Okay, then so then another study that we did was developmental syntactic abilities. This is we received a grant from British Council, and me and my PI co-lead from the UK, Professor Lee Zhen Jin, we actually look at um, the syntactic abilities of Malay children and Chinese children, 130 Malay children and 130 Chinese children from the age of 1 year to 6'11". And these are free conversations that we have in play, free conversation in cooking sets. We give them a picture book, a picture storybook, and they retell us the race between a tortoise and a hare. And then we ask them about relating personal experience, like buat apa masa cuti sekolah, balik kampung buat apa. So dia cerita lah. So then we collected language samples. So this is a very tedious hard work by our students, 3 cohorts final year students who actually helped us to analyze. And then based on that, we looked at the language sample based on the LARS. So LARS is a language profile, language assessment, remediation screening procedure, LARS, created by David Crystal, David Crystal in the UK. And we actually adapted the LARS into Malay. These are all tools that speech therapists need in their management of their children in clinic. So that's why my role in UKM at that time was to help the speech therapists, because we are linguists, right? We know more about language, about grammar. So we are the best person actually to develop tools for use in clinic. So we did that, and I wanted to. So for example, one of the analysis that we did that is that this LARS, it is divided into stages. So stage 1 is 1 word utterance, stage 2 is 2 word utterance, stage 3 is 3 word utterance. It goes until 5, and then and 7 is discourse. So by our profiling of the language of children between 1 year old until 111, about 2 years old, again, we find that these are the black is the stage 1. Stage 1 is 1 word utterance. And you find that they started with 1 word utterance, and then they have 50-50 by 1 year 3 months and 1 year 5 months, and then by 1 year 8 months they are now speaking 2 words utterance, and then also before 2 years old, 1 year 11, they are 2 word utterance. Another sample of analysis that we did is we looked at the verb phrase development among the children, and these are the early patterns of verb phrase construction. As you can see, it started with the verbs only, which were early verbs like nak, and then buka, and then children started using verbs with auxiliary seperti nak, nak buka, nak makan, kan. And then but as they do that, you can see that the verbs, the loan verbs reducing in frequency of use. And then of course children have a harder time, a later time of doing the verb and adverbial, because as you know, adverbial, they are not core meaning, they are just additional meaning. So that is acquired later. Okay, then we go now to recent studies. I want to show you that people are now going into online. So this is a study, Reading in Health Aging, Selective Use of Information Structuring Cues. This is Dr. Jessica Price from University of Nottingham, Malaysia. So this study was to test whether the ability to use information structure cues changes with the change in age, whether older readers are more or less able to selectively attend or suppress concepts. Yeah? So then they look at a comparison between comparing main versus subordinate clauses and comparing proper names versus roles. Yeah, so this, I think she's using this a reading paradigm, a self-paced reading paradigm, and it is like using E prime. Yeah, okay. So this is an example of how language is analyzed in the users. And then we have another one also from Jessica Price is Where What You Learn, an innovative way to foster out of class learning. This study is looking at pictures. They want to see whether pictures or words would attract students' attention more. So they did a study on 71 year one student, and they used the eye tracking. The eye tracking showed that they initially looked longer at the pictures compared to the words. And then they did a focus group discussion where the subjects actually explain why pictures are more interesting to watch than words. Yeah. So this is an implication for our textbook or writers of books. Yeah. Okay, and then another upcoming researcher is Associate Professor Dr. Khazriati Salihuddin from UKM. So in this study, she is actually she has a eye tracking machine, okay, in her lab. Pembacaan ungkapan literal dan metafora Melayu, satu kajian penjejakan mata. So eye tracking. So ini melibatkan 40 orang pelajar membaca 40 ayat yang mengandungi 20 ungkapan literal dan 20 ungkapan metafora, dan menggunakan Toby ini eye tracking machine untuk melihat hubung kait antara the eye movement and the cognition of the readers. Yeah, so they looked at several measures: visit count, fixation duration, and fixation count. Dan mereka dapat melihat bahawa bila mahasiswa universiti ini membaca ungkapan yang ada metafora, dia punya eye is fixated more longer than kalau it's a literal meaning lah. You might say that it's obvious, the conclusion is obvious, but I think to have objective measures to prove that assumption is very interesting. Yeah? This is the way to go actually. Another study by Khazriati, reading the English academic text, evidence from ESL undergraduates' eye movement data. So this study aims to investigate the cognitive processes that take place when ESL undergraduates read English academic text using the eye tracking. So they find that revealed that participants who failed to recall the text had longer fixation duration and resulted in more word regression compared to participants who could recall and explain the text accurately. So they were using, I think, articles, scientific articles, but just the beginning of the articles, I mean the introduction lah, so that it's not that hard. And then they also found that vocabulary used in academic text was found to be one of the factors that affect the comprehension of the text. Of course, yeah, the vocabulary would be the register, the terminology. Yeah? So the findings of the study suggest that specialized instruction that emphasize on reading skills, academic reading skills, should be implemented at the university level. Then this is a study that I was involved with, a speech performance among healthy Malay female speakers during dual, task, and sentence complexity. So this is to look at whether if you read just the sentence, is it easier compared to if you are doing multitasking, a few tasks. I will discuss about this study later, but this is So we came up, I think I'm more instrumental in the sentence complexity part. And then Dr. Chu Shin Ying, who is a speech language pathologist, clinician and researcher, she's the one who's the lead for this study. Very interesting, yeah. Okay, then this is Hazriati again, doing relationship between this systemic review. So if you want to look at a review, get a tour of the event related potential and socioeconomic status, then you can read this study. Okay. This is a study that's just out, onset of English lexical acquisition among Malaysian preschoolers. This is by Dr. Ruby. Dr. Ruby is a director of the Bilingual Child Center in Universiti Islam Antarabangsa. And she is a proponent of what's the study? Processibility theory of language acquisition. So this is where she looks at the onset of English lexical acquisition among 99 Malaysian preschoolers. These are children in Klang Valley, and then their language production was elicited in individual communicative tasks. That means one-on-one. And then their lexical output, both in English and Malay, were analysed based on the children's language choice during the session. So the results indicate that Malaysian preschoolers displayed a limited range of productive abilities and age-sensitive vocabulary in English. However, their receptive skills are better than their productive skills. So at least they have the receptive skills. They have been exposed to the language. It's just enriching it further. Okay. This is a study. So we've been looking at initially it was just the monolingual speakers, monolingual children. But another trend that I find is that we should go into bilingual or multilingual. So in 2001, this is my final year student in UKM. She's my master student. We did a bilingual Malay sentence repetition task. Sentence repetition task is also a very sensitive task that can differentiate between language impairment and normal language. So it's a kind of study that is very popular now, sentence repetition task, because you read the sentence and then the child hears the sentence and then repeat the sentence. So the ability to repeat the sentence will be based on their language abilities. So everyone can do it, but the 4-year-old can do it less than the 6-year-old can do it most. The 6-year-old can actually repeat the whole sentence. The 5-year-old might repeat some, might drop some, and then the 4-year-old might just repeat the core meaning. So in this study, we actually look at Malay children using Malay and English and sentence repetition tasks, and we saw that there was transfer between the first language and the second language, and sometimes the structures are from the first language. So speaking English, but using the structure of Malay language. So that is interesting. And then with another student, we did a multilingual sentence repetition task. And this multilingual sentence repetition task involves Chinese children. So Chinese children using Mandarin, Malay, and English. So we came up with the multilingual sentence repetition task, which has not been, which is the first. Usually it's monolingual sentence repetition, but now we come up with multilingual. So it gives because when we talk about multilingualism right now, we need to look at the group of languages that the child knows, and we need to test each language that the child knows to see whether which language is he scores more and which language he scores less. So having a multilingual sentence repetition task enables us to assess the child in all the languages that they know. So you could imagine that for Malay children is Malay and English. For Chinese children, the 3 languages. And for Indian children, maybe it depends on the children. Maybe it's Malay and English or Malay, English, Tamil. Yeah, so, but that one has not been done yet for Tamil. Okay, this one I wanted to show you the online. So we were looking at the reading English academic text. So by Hasriati, and then the speech performance among healthy Malay female speakers during dual task and sentence complexity, of which I'm one of the co-researcher. So the first study investigate the cognitive processes that take place when ESL undergraduates read English academic text using eye movement data. 20 participants using Toby eye tracker. So they look at total fixation duration, analysis of scan path, retrospective interview of the subjects after the experiment. Yeah? So then the findings revealed that participants who failed to recall the text had longer fixation duration and resulted in more inwards regression compared to uh, participants who were able to recall and explain the text accurately. As I said just now, vocabulary is also a factor. In the second study, we wanted to identify how different dual tasks influence speech performance among female. And we also manipulate the complexity of the sentence. We did a simple sentence and a complex sentence. So subjects were audio recorded while executing a series of simple and complex sentence repetition tasks. But then the conditions varied. That means they do a speech task only. Speech task means the language task. And then, or they do a speech and cognitive task, or a speech and linguistic task, or a speech and manual task. And then we vary the complexity. So we look at various, we look at word accuracy rate, response time, duration of sentence. Significant results with the word accurate rate was found when they were reading sentences only compared to when they were reading and completing another task simultaneously. The pairwise comparison further revealed that the conditions of speech and manual tasks produce the lowest word accuracy rate. So that means when you are multitasking, you might, be not so accurate when you are repeating the sentence. Okay, so that is the kind of online tasks that are done now. Yeah. So from the earlier studies, from the studies that we've discussed, so the earlier studies tend to be offline studies, which gave the depth and the breadth of data, especially the qualitative nature of the data. Like Pangantas Manjunta, his PhD thesis was really thick, like I don't know how many kg, but he had so much data there. And then, okay, and then there is limited data, there is limited research basically, because I don't think most linguists are turned away by the extent of the data, because when we do psycholinguistics, language acquisition or second language acquisition, we do a lot of language samples. When you do language sample, you will record, you will transcribe, and you will analyze. So people are quite deterred, but actually those are the kind of studies that are needed for speech language therapy. Yeah? So due to limited research, there is a dearth of resources, particularly for purposes of determining milestones and ascertaining normative data. This is very important, yeah, because how do you know whether the child is age appropriate? Is when he has achieved milestone for that stage. But in Malay, we yet to have this, because you have to do a big scale study, yeah, in order to establish the milestones. And then also, in order for the speech therapist to know what is abnormal, they must know what is normal. So the normative data is not readily available in Malay linguistics, or studies on Malay language. We need to establish milestones. because we need to know at which age Malay children acquire certain sounds, certain morphemes, and certain words. Even for milestones of semantics and pragmatics, So in English they have Brown's milestones for morpheme acquisition. In Malay we don't have that, so that is something that we should aim for, that we have developmental milestone, because we cannot use the milestone from the West, because the milestone from the West are by the children in the West. We need to have our own local milestone. And as you know, because we are multilingual, so the languages that children speak are influenced by the language environment. So that is why it's difficult. We need to come up, we need to help the speech therapists. We need to come up with clinical markers. What is clinical markers? Means that these are the problematic areas that children with difficulties find difficult to acquire, or people learning another language find it difficult to acquire. So for example, if we are learning English, tenses seems to be a clinical marker because it is posing difficulty for learners and also people with special needs, communication disorders, let's say, kan. So these are the things. So the unavailability of this kind of data is a stumbling block for studies on language impairment, such as developmental language delay. Yeah. So these are the needs of because when we do, I used to be an armchair linguist. I was a syntactician before, right? So in USM, in I was a armchair linguist. Means I only deal with theory, movement in the syntax. But when I moved to UKM, I found that there is a purpose to us doing language studies or to us doing linguistics, meaning all those analyses are meant to be used by speech therapists so that they can help their children who has autism, Down syndrome, developmental language delay. Yeah. Okay, so that's the summary of it. And then online studies using eye tracking, as you have seen, EG and fMRI. Yeah. This one unique collaboration. That means you must have collaboration with faculties in your institution. So for example, with medical faculty. So we language people, we need to reach out to the language faculty, or we can also collaborate with people in computer science or in engineering. Because what happens is that the field of speech language therapy, they what they do is they try to manage the difficulty of the children or of the adults, but what they're managing is actually language or speech, which is our domain. So it is on us. The onus is on us to make full use of our analysis for a benefitful, more practical purpose. And that's what I term it as clinical linguistics. Actually, when you try to apply the linguistic analysis to clinical data from people with communication disorders, let's say. But I think I'm not gonna do this. I think how much time do I have here, Cik? Mr. Shafiq? 1 hour already.
I still have about 15 more minutes according to
Yeah, so I'm not going to do this. I was going to explain. I'm going to talk more about some study that I did with University of University in Canada, Calgary University. Uh, so so this is my ongoing research. So I'm actually involved in a research project looking at child language acquisition data in terms of their comprehension and their production from preschool to school age. We just started this. I was just invited into this by Professor Teresa Guasti, who is a researcher, a lead a prominent researcher in Italy. So I've been roped in, and we're going to collect Malay data of the children. I'm also involved right now in the FRGS, which is classification of mild cognitive impairment and distinguishing it from healthy cognitive aging, using using multimodal approach combining language tasks, eye tracking, and fMRI. So the task itself will come from me in terms of the sentence. So we're going to do sentence repetition, sentence understanding. Yeah. And what is exciting is that it's going to use fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging, which is like X-ray, but more looking at the brain activities when the subjects are doing the language task. Another research that I've been invited to by the Faculty of Computer Science, UKM, is looking at biomarkers of children with dyslexia. So in this instance also, my role is to come up with the task. So we do phonological awareness tasks, we do reading tasks, spelling and writing. Yeah. So these are the collaboration. We cannot be doing research in our own silos. We have to collaborate with people from the different faculties in our own university or even outside of our university. Okay. I also want to invite, I've been a part of this series of conferences, International Connect Malaysia. We call them Connectum conference series. And this is a collaboration between when I was in speech science, UKM, and still there are other colleagues who are also involved in UKM. The English language department in UPM, Dr. Yap Ni Tai, Associate Professor Dr. Yap Ni Tai. So we were the pioneer from Malaysia, counterpart from Malaysia. And of course, now I'm in Faculty of Education, but we collaborate with University of Reading, UK, and University of Reading, Malaysia, and recently University of Nottingham, Malaysia. So this, every 2 years, all of us will organize this. So we just had it last year, 17 to 19 August, but this is a conference which will attract researchers from neuroscience, from clinical language science, from psycholinguistics. And if you're interested in this field, this is one series conference that you should never miss. At least be a participant, or we welcome presentation from you on your ongoing or your projects. Yeah. So be a part of this. I'm so happy that we are able to connect people from Malaysia, researchers from Malaysia to researchers in the UK. Okay. Okay. I'm gonna give this PowerPoint to the organizer for anyone who wants a copy of it. But look me up in ResearchGate. This is my link, and you can follow the activities that I'm doing at this profile page in ResearchGate. Yeah? Okay, I think that's it, Mr. Shafiq. Terima kasih.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof, for sharing about all this and also the trends in current psycholinguistic studies and research in Malaysia. Now, we'd like to open the session for question and answer session. Do we have any questions from the audience? Please. Anyone? You can just put the question in our chat box, or you can just on your microphone. Okay. All right, let me begin, Prof. I have a question. I'm not sure whether this is directly related to the studies in psycholinguistics. Now, currently, in terms of this pandemic era, Professor, especially with our children trapped behind Zoom or WebEx, trapped behind their masks, and also with the remote learning from home, where the parties that they are interacting with are their parents, not their friends or teachers. How does this situation change the paradigm of studies with regards to psycholinguistics?
Okay, that's a good question, Cik Shafiq. Yeah, it has been a hindrance, because you need to, sometimes you need to do the studies on the child, doing the task. And, but we are leveraging on the platform. So we will have the adult, the parent, or an adult with the child, and then we get the child to respond, do some tasks. Like a lot of us are now very adept at online platform. We teach, we learn.
True.
Even clinicians, speech language therapists, they do therapy online. So that then it shouldn't be a hindrance to people trying to. Of course, it will turn away some people because it is a lot of challenge. They tend to do survey studies instead of actual. But some of the studies that we did, we had an online website that let's say the study that we did on cross linguistic tasks, which I didn't discuss just now. It is a study that was headed by University of Warsaw, Poland, and they had the online website where when our subjects uh, go on the laptop or on their smartphone to answer questions about language, it will straight go to their website. So those kind of tasks that is a remote kind of input of data, that will not be deterred due to the pandemic. So I think we should be looking at more of like that. People responding, but the data goes straight to a certain website that can analyze it. Yeah.
Mhm. Okay, thank you very much, Prof, for that answer. And we have one question in our chat box from Dr. Putri Rohani. Thank you very much for the question, dear Professor. Interesting sharing. Now, has any study done using eye tracking for writing skill? And that is the question, Prof.
Yeah, eye tracking. Yeah. Um, I'm actually in the FRGS project that the dyslexia project. Yeah? I'm actually formulating right now the tasks for the fMRI, where they also do. We also have eye tracking. Um, but for fMRI, the machine that we have in the hospital UKM or hospital kanak-kanak pakar kanak-kanak tu, their machine cannot do the reading task where the subjects have to read the words or the passages, and also the writing task in the chamber, in the fMRI chamber. So unfortunately, at this moment, we have to do it offline.
Mhm.
For eye tracking, uh, I'm sure. Yeah, from the research that I have presented today, it doesn't look like that there are the studies on writing, but I'm sure there should be. If there's reading, there should be writing.
Right.
So and especially eye tracking. Eye tracking is very. I really don't know. Eye tracking. I guess Doktor apa tadi tanya tadi?
Dr. Putri Rohani.
Putri
Yes.
Rohani. Maybe if you are interested, maybe you should get in touch with Associate Professor Dr. Khazriati of UKM. I'm sure she's willing to collaborate with you, um, because she has the machine and she can. Yeah, I think she might be looking at apa tu, the writing part also. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for the question for that answer. Now we have another question in our chat box from Lin Chi Ying. Thank you so very much, Lin Chi Ying, for participating. Now, as Prof mentioned, interventions must be done at early age. Now, how to help parents to identify the kids having problems in learning languages? Are there any tools that they can use within their disposal in their own house? Thank you very much, Professor.
Right. Parents, because they spend a lot of time with their kids, and especially if they have more than one kid, they have a sense of whether their child is developing normally. Like, or they would see their child and then they would see the cousins of their child, their nephew and nieces at the same age, maybe, and then they can figure out, is my child having problem? Why is my child not speaking at 3 years old? So they have this sense of, so the intuition of parents is very valuable. Is there a tool?
Mhm.
Actually, when the child is 3 years and below, you cannot do a direct elicitation from the child, because one is the child is too young. Secondly, is the development is very rapid, and nobody has actually come up with a tool that can test directly the child. What they do is actually they do a parent report. That means we have the MacArthur developmental checklist. We also done it into Malay if anyone is interested. Kita panggil profile bahasa awal kanak-kanak Melayu. Where we actually ask parents, can the child say this? Faham ni, guna atau dah tak guna lagi? So it is a parent checklist which looks at gestures, vocalization, words, sentences. So parents yang report. Although people say parents might over-report or under-report, but the research has shown that actually, on average, parents are good orang kata apa, testimony for their children. They can really report on their children. Jadi based on that profile, parent profile, speech therapists or researchers can actually determine the apa sih, the development of the child based on the overall children in that age. So the tool is the profile. Yeah, so two is the profile right now, and then your intuition as a parent. So if children actually start to say the first word 9 months. So by 2 years, if they don't have the one word, then that's the cause for concern. Sometimes the developmental stages of the children also is very important. If they don't do something, if they don't babble at a certain time, or they don't want to be they don't stand at a certain age, like about 1 year old, then you must look carefully, and it's never too late, it's never too early to don't uh, how do you say, jangan perjudikan masa depan anak-anak bila nampak macam budak tu ada masalah. Just go to any pediatrician or any speech language pathologist to find out. If you're wrong, it's okay. But if you're right, because some people, they tend to say, wait until the child is 3 years old, then 4 year old or 5 years old. Okay. And then yeah.
The key is to seek help as soon as possible.
As soon as possible.
Okay,
Just in
right.
case. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that answer. Thank you very much, Ching, for asking. Now we have another question from Nur Najiha Marafan. Dear Prof, is there any relationship between speech delay in children and psycholinguistics? And if yes, how do we overcome the problem?
You know, speech delay. Speech delay means they reach a certain milestone late. So that means some children at 3 years old not able to speak. But sometimes they are late talkers, meaning that what they're doing is they're absorbing all the language input, and then voila, in maybe 5 or 6 years old, they start to talk, So they are late talkers. So, but then you can never know whether they are a late talker or they really have a problem. So, and then the connection between psycholinguistic is, as we say, it is a study which looks at how people understand the language, use the language, process the language. So for a language delay, speech delay, they are having problems to do that, to understand, to use, to perceive the different sounds, for example. So it's very connected. We not only in psycholinguistics, we not only deal with typically developing children, but we are also looking at children with either language delay or language disorders. Very pertinent, yes.
Okay, right. How do we overcome the problem? As the second part of the question by Nona Jiha just now.
Overcome the problem of
the problem of speech delay. It's related to psycholinguistics.
Actually, if you watch videos of parents with their children, so we have interaction between parents and child in the West versus parent and child in the East. Kita lah orang Timur kan. We tend to not talk to our children, but you see people in the West, they really engage with their children, and because oral language is very important. Oral language if oral language is a strong precursor of academic excellence in school. So if a child is talkative, is using a lot of language, that is a good precursor that he or she will be a good student in school. So if all parents know this, timur ke barat ke, timur especially lah, then we'll be racing against each other to talk to our kids and stimulating their language. So for example, stimulating macam mana kalau budak tu kata tu kereta, then mak akan cakap, oh itu kereta biru, besar kan kereta tu. So you expand on it. So the child is receiving actually language stimulation, language modeling. Yeah. Jadi for language delay, it's actually stimulation. You must stimulate your child's language by talking to them, less of screen time. This is our bane. Less of screen time, less of phone, smartphone, less of tab or laptop. Unless you're with them. So you must control screen time and you must be there, because if you're not there, it is only a one-way communication. If you're there, you're actually the child is looking at something and you are commenting, and the child will be also replying to your comment. So so screen time, and because a lot of children with problems, with language problems, communication disorders, uh, we notice that parents tend to leave them alone, leave them with their laptop or leave them with their smartphone, but that's not it. That's not the way to go. The more that they have problems, the more that you should stimulate their language. Okay.
All right.
So yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Rob. I think that the key should be about engagement and expanding on the engagement with children in terms of overcoming this. Right. Let's go to the next question from Rogayah A Razak. Thank you very much for your participation, Madam Rogayah. I read somewhere say during this pandemic, it affects children with capabilities to read mouth motion for their linguistic skills, since most of the time we have used our face mask. What do you think about this, Prof?
Yes, children with hearing impairment, either they cannot hear well or they cannot hear much or at all. So because of the hearing, they have a problem in hearing, then their alternative route is visual. They will be lip reading. That's why if you are talking to a child with hearing impairment, make sure that you are sitting on the good ear, or sitting in front of them so that they can see you. So that's why in classroom, for example, the audiologist will advise the teachers to put the students with hearing impairment not at the back, but in front. Also using FM system, whereby the child and the teacher will use an FM system like a earphone, where the sounds are being relayed by the FM system. So yes, the face mask is influencing some children or even adult to understand what is being spoken. Yeah, I agree with that.
All right, thank you very much, Prof, for that answer. All right, another question from Dr. Nurul Kamalia. Thank you very much, sir, for participating. Thank you for sharing about the conference and study that you have conducted. Are all intriguing. I was thinking to see differences among groups on writing skills and to add geographical units. So please inspire me with new ideas. Thank you. All right, your response, Prof.
Writing. There was one work on writing that we did with, it's a case study based on an individual with adult with aphasia. So we look at how he recovered his writing skills. In terms of the school children writing, I think it is connected to reading. To me lah. In order to write, they need to be able to decipher the code, to segment the word, to voice the phonemes, to spell. So in order to write, they need to spell. So that's the mechanics of writing, right? The first um, level of writing is the mechanics of writing. That means, are they able to spell the words so that they can write the words in the sentences? And then when that is overcome, mastered, then you do the writing in terms of writing to answer comprehension question, and then after that, or at the same time, you can start with creative writing. Actually, to tell the truth, I have not done any research on writing, but I think that's how I would see it lah. That so it depends on what you want to do. Are you going to do the mechanics of writing, or are you going to do the spelling skills? Some people have looked at spelling skills based on languages, so they feel that Malay is a transparent language where people have no difficulty reading and writing because the segments are very clear. You know, English and some other languages are opaque languages. It's when you are spelling, learning how to spell, English is very difficult because there are the silent sounds and the so it's difficult. So maybe you want to look at the multilingualism of the students or the people in your that you want to do as take as your subjects, and see whether the languages when because they are multilingual, so does that affect their spelling, their writing skills? Maybe that's one, looking at multilingualism from the writing perspective, I think. I hope I wish I could tell you more, but I something that I have not done writing. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much.
Hello, may
Hi.
I join in the talk?
Yes, you may, madam. You may if you want to ask question, please. Thank you very much.
Yes. I'm very interested in this talk, but unfortunately, nothing much on adults, only children, because cognitive development and psycholinguistics and cognitive development in the older children can also be very interesting instead of just looking at eye tracking. Not many teachers can do that.
Mhm.
And so in school, I think teachers are more interested in looking what more adult, you can say them children, more adults are doing in terms of language acquisition. So would there be another talk on that? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Actually, the other area that I do work on is adults with aphasia. So we've done sentence comprehension. We present them with sentences, and they point to the picture that matches the sentence that they just heard. So that is a test of comprehension. As I said just now, we also did orthography, writing skills of a case study of a person with aphasia. Truthfully, I'm not my area is not school age children. So actually, when you do research, there are segments of the population that you are focusing on. So my forte is actually preschool, but I do sometimes get into the school age. So school age, when we say school age, we're talking about 7 to 17 or 19 years old. Children in primary and also in secondary and maybe form 6, so you're looking at that. So if we are looking at that, let's say if you're looking at secondary, then you could do some creative writing with them, or critical thinking, critical writing with them, so that it tests their creativity and your appreciation of the language, either in Malay or in English. I don't know. I'm sure. Is it Puan Badaria?
Puan Badaria, yes.
Yeah. So yeah, sure. I can think of something later, but contact me and we'll see what is your interest and how I can help.
Yeah, because I was talking to a group of teachers in the what do you call it, in early education, and they were saying that their main interest would be in reading, because they said the role of reading is paramount once they go to school. So to make sure that the children are on par with the other children who might have gone to other preschools, they are concentrating on also the acquisition of reading. And you said that you said speech is paramount, and I think based on your talk, speech is not paramount in academic success, because there are many uneducated people who can speak a lot, but they are not really good in academic. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you very
Okay,
much.
those research that have been done and they done longitudinal. So they done a sustainable study where they do the study and then they follow up the subjects maybe for a certain number of time post experiment. So it is a very well known established assumption that oral language is a precursor. Precursor means is a strong criteria for doing well in school. So the reason why we say that is not that anything else or every other factors are not important. We want to stress to the parents that if the child is outspoken, is verbal, talkative, carry on. If the child is quiet, make him talk. Because when you are verbally fluent, they call it oral. If your oral is good, then the probability of you doing well in school is good. Although we cannot put aside all the other factors. So I think in research, uh, it's not this or that, but it's maybe a combination, or they might be having a different perspective. I wouldn't say it is not. You need to come up with certain studies that show it's not. So in that sense, we are actually trying to look at the factors that are important for our children and adults. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you. May I continue?
Sure,
May I
sure.
continue?
Yes.
I'm in a group of people who are interested in this psycholinguistics and, qualitative research, because that's very much where you are coming from too. It's not so much of quantitative, but qualitative to get better data, right? So we were talking about Japanese students, especially. They don't speak much. This is from a lecturer in the universities in America. Japanese students do not speak much, but they deliver very good papers because they're very much into writing. And they are very good in reading, of course, to be able to write, because academic papers are very much into, when you have to write papers, it's not just any kind of talk. It's based on reading. So I'm wondering, how can, before that, in Malaysia, I read that, by the way, I'm from New Zealand. In Malaysia, I read that there's so much on communicative competence, which is speaking. But communicative competence in English, is it really necessary? Because there are students in what the Americans say, the boondocks, in the rural areas, they don't even speak English. They don't need that. So why are we concentrating on communicative competence, not on communicative competence with the writers? That means you can argue, you talk to them. Well, then that's why I'm interested in other studies instead of just children. I want to see what's happening with the more adult children, Prof. Thank you.
Thank you very much, madam, for that advice. I think, Prof, your response.
Yeah, I think communicative competence is an approach in language learning. I grew up with communicative competence when I was in school, whereby we learn the language through the situations of language use. So when you meet someone, what are the things that you say? And you go to the shop, what are you going to use? The language structure, the words. I think there is a merit for it because it is enough language, enough vocabulary, enough structure for a certain situation. Although I can see that it doesn't provide you with good grammar, because the grammar is being embedded in the language. So sometimes students might not see the grammar. So sometimes grammar is best taught directly, that yeah, okay, passive is like this, tenses are like this, rather than actually embedded in the situation, so the students cannot see it. There is a reason for it. I can see the point of view of it. As you were saying that rural, in the boondocks, people in the boondocks, di pedalaman, they don't speak, they speak rural English, or maybe a dialect of English or a variety of English. To me, that's okay, because that variety also has a system of its own. So if that person is coming to is going to be involved in a government exam, a public exam, then that person has to learn the language that is the variety that's used in exams in the schools. Yeah? So they just have to switch, they have to transition from their dialect, their English variety, to another English variety. So I myself don't subscribe to the fact, to the notion that dialects are inferior. I don't think any dialects are inferior. It is just your ability to transition. Let's say I'm from Melaka. When I go back to Melaka, I speak Melaka. But when I'm not with my family or my relatives, I'm with my friends, and then switch to another variety of Malay or English. So it's just a matter of that is social competence, a language competence that you need to have when you're using language. Yeah. So whatever it is, I think uh, actually I don't really know the question, but I hope that answers it. Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much for your response, and thank you very much for Madam Maria also for participating. And we have another question from our chat box today from SW Wong. I hope I got it right. Thank you for the insightful sharing, Prof. As a clinician, I'm very intrigued at how multilingualism interacted with aphasia. I believe that this is one of the areas that could be focused and emphasized on to support clinical practice and quality. Is there currently a direction of research we should focus on when it comes to psycholinguistics, especially in multilingualism and aphasia? Thanks in advance. Prof, your response.
Actually, our multilingualism is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Researchers from abroad are just attracted to our multilingualism, because our multilingualism is the mainstream. That means mainstream, all of us are multilinguals, bilingual or multilingual, right? But in the West, their multilinguals are the fringes. They are the migrants, marginalized society, part of the society. But in Malaysia, in Southeast Asia, in Asia, I think the mainstream is multilingual. So multilingualism, we should focus as linguists, language researchers. We should focus on our multilingualism. Um, so um, one study that is very interesting is looking at how an adult with aphasia and multilingualism. Because let's say a person has 4 languages that he or she knows, but post-stroke, after he had the stroke, he lost. He was good in, let's say, Chinese Mandarin. He was good in Mandarin, but after aphasia, he sort of lost. He was not quite proficient in Mandarin, but he's better in Malay. So there has been studies on language loss among people with aphasia, and that kind of study has not been done in Malaysia. So there's so much to do in the area of aphasia and multilingualism that I really, invite people to just go ahead and do studies on that, because we are really lacking of studies actually, Cik Syafiq. Banyak bidang dalam uh, aspek komunikasi ni yang perlu diselidiki, tapi belum lagi diselidiki oleh pengkaji-pengkaji kita. Dan sebenarnya itulah sumbangan kita kepada negara sebenarnya, kepada komuniti kita, masyarakat kita, iaitu cuba membuatkan kajian kita, dapatan daripada kajian itu bermanfaat kepada pengguna bahasa yang ada masalah komunikasi misalnya. So really support that. Yeah, multilingualism, like I was saying, among children also, pun tak banyak diselidiki. So, if you go into the literature, you do a literature search on multilingualism. I would first do a search on multilingualism in Malaysia. Siapa yang dah publish on this topic, and look at what are the issues that they raise. And then look at the overall studies on multilingualism, and then look at um, a certain segment of the population that you nak study. You know, so get at the research gap. What is the problem? What is the problem that you're trying to solve? Get the research gap, and then do the study. A lot has yet to be done, because tak ramai yang buat. But I would strongly recommend katakan Miss Wong to actually work together, collaborate with you. If you're a linguist or language person, you work with clinicians, speech language pathologists, katakan speech therapists. They will tell you what they need, and you can help them to at least provide data for that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much,
Yeah.
Prof, for that response. We have another question, but before that, everyone, the link for our attendance this afternoon is in our chat box. Please fill that up before you go today. All right, the other question from Intan PJ, sorry, thank you so very much for participating. Any thoughts regarding multilinguistic dilemma for the deaf and people with hearing loss community? This is problems as lack of communication with typical communities, especially at health centers, banks, schools, and other places. Your response on this, Prof?
Again, actually, not much has been studied on hearing impairment and multilingual hearing impaired individuals. Yeah. With hearing impairment, I think one of the area of concern is the articulation. So when you have hearing impairment, at a certain point, you see a normal child and a child with hearing impairment. They grow. They you compare them. Um, they are similar until they get to babbling. The normal child will continue, but the child with hearing impairment will stop, and then they are not hearing unless they are detected and they are given either hearing aid or cochlear implant. Um, so when you're not hearing, you're not forming your repository. I don't know how to explain. Repository of knowledge of the language. You know that. So when you are so we find that people with hearing impairment, they have one of the areas that they are having problem with is articulation of sounds. So sometimes their speech is different from the speech of other speakers, because there are certain the sounds have certain frequency. There are certain sounds that they cannot hear because of the frequency. That means they are not able to hear at that frequency. Like I think sir is a very difficult sound because of the frequency that sound is at. Although again, I have to apologize that this is not my area of study, but this is what I found that in UKM we have a very good cochlear implant program, um, adults and children. And if you're interested, just Google and see. Okay, Fakulti Sains Kesihatan ada pusat ears, HEARS, pusat ears. This is a pusat which deals with the management of people with hearing impairment, hearing loss, hearing impairment. They do research, they do clinical, they do public promotion through collaboration with Yayasan Budi Penyayang. So yes, I would, and we're not talking about hearing impaired people who are using sign language. The ones, the UKM, for example, they are mostly dealing with, although they do deal with people using sign language, but they are mostly dealing with people who are using using language, and they are aided by the hearing aid or by the cochlear implant, where you put a bionic eardrum uh, in your ear. so that you can hear. So once you hear, then they start to you have to go through speech therapy and also audiological services to make sure that you're hearing the sounds at the correct frequency. And then they teach you how to speak and how to hear. Yeah. So what was the question? Just I can't remember. But yeah, hearing impairment.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you very much, Prof, for that response. Right, in our chat box, I am a speech language therapy. Mr. Wong is sorry. Thank you again for the guidance, Prof. Right. Okay, any other question from the audience that you can address before the end of the session? Anyone? Right.
I'm also amazed that Puan Badaria is from New Zealand.
Yeah.
So your webinar is getting
Yes. There is indeed a great opportunity for us to expose people towards this field of study, because this is kind of question for me, because I will admit that I'm not very familiar with this field of study, Prof. So how do you think that we can make this area of study more accessible to parents, to those who have a limited knowledge about all of these scientific findings? Because as you said just now, you don't want to be living in a chamber or a silo where the findings of our study can only be used between people who understand these things. How can we make this more accessible, Prof?
Yeah. Actually, the research findings are meant for the professionals, so they can use this evidence and plan for their management work with individuals with communication disorders. Let's say, they are more informed. Never meant for parents, unless the parent is very they are open to new knowledge. They read. Some parents are very innovative, have initiative. They themselves look for the knowledge and they learn. So if we are people who seek knowledge, practical knowledge for our use, then this kind of findings can be used by them. Because the findings are they're not in a concrete form yet, right? So when you do a finding, they're not in a concrete form. Someone else or that same researcher have to do further research. Like, so for example, when we did the MPLAT, the language tool to distinguish children at risk, we had to do a lot of research first. So we had to test a lot of kids. So we tested children in Kuala Lumpur, Klang Valley, and then we tested children in Kelantan, um, um, many batches of kids. So after 509, I think, children tested with all the components of the test, then we are able to say, this is the normative data. What is the average? What is the average for this age group? So then we are able to say, what is their ability? What can a 4-year-old do, or 5 or 6? And then we went ahead and tested the integrity of the test of the tool. So we did reliability, validity test, sensitivity, specificity. It is rightly indicating that that child has a problem. It's not a false alarm, let's say. So it has to be, so from research, that's why they say from lab to industry. From lab, that is your research, to the industry to produce it commercially. So it is very heartening to know that the universities now are very into products. That means if you apply for FRGS or TRGS, LRGS, you must make sure that you have outcomes from your research, so that your research is not just, at your own whims and desire, but you are projecting what is the product. Are you producing a tool? Are you producing a module? Can it be used by the practitioners? So then it is a bigger responsibility on the researchers actually to make sure that their proposal has a mix of the theory and the practical, to be able to be used by the stakeholders, the parents, or the
All right, understood. Well,
Yeah.
thank you very much for the response. We have another question from our chat box.
Oh,
This
good.
comes
Oh,
from,
very active, huh?
yeah, from Mr. Muhammad Anwar bin Muhammad Kamal. Thank you very much, Mr. Anwar, for participating this afternoon. Dear Prof, hoping the question is related to the webinar. Now, from your own experience, how would you address speech participations among students, especially the passive ones? So thank you in advance. Yeah,
Apa,
Prof.
speech participation.
Speech participation, yeah, according to this question. I'm not sure. Speech participation, yeah.
A willingness to communicate.
Yeah. Mm-mm.
This is an area of study in English second language, English foreign language. The willingness of students to participate in public debate or public talks, or even just communicate with their classmates or just the public, how willing are you to communicate if you're at the bus stop? Are you able to use the language to communicate with people? So this is an area of study that actually it of course you are looking at a construct that will involve many factors like constructivism factor, learner factor, the mediating factor, like what are the factors that will encourage students to actually participate. So one of the factors that was found is the teacher themselves, that the teacher are engaging, that the teacher are making it easy for the students to participate, that the activities are real, are relevant, and there is no backlash when the student speaks, not being corrected on the spot, making it easy for the students to practice talking. What is important is that they speak, not that they speak proper English. I think that can be handled in another segment of the class, grammar class maybe, or unless you're doing a public speaking, like giving a speech or something. But just willingness to communicate should be encouraged lah. I know it's a factor in second language and foreign language learning, that people are, yalah macam let's say kita belajar Arabic tau. Not a language that most of us know. So
True.
it's difficult kan nak Arabic nak bercakap pun, then kalau nak ngaji pun it's difficult to, kita malu lah because we don't we know we are not that good at it. But apa pun I selalu cakap dengan student I, learning a language is like riding a bicycle. So you'll get hurt, you'll go down the drain, you'll hit the wall, but just persist at it, and then you'll become better. So I've heard parents in supermarkets, they speak to their children. They're also speaking broken language, let's say broken English lah. But actually, at least their child is speaking English, And then when they go to school, they can improve their language. Yeah. Rather than not speaking it at all. So you can hear when you are doing your shopping, parents talking to their children. So now Malay parents are mostly for English. So you can find them talking to their children in English at the supermarket. I can also hear Chinese parents talking to their kids, and they don't mind. They just talk like Malaysian English pun. Apa salahnya kan? So cakap lah Malaysian English. So at least the child is speaking English, rather than the child not speaking at all. Jadi kita Melayu ni kita lebih malu, malu tak betul dan sebagainya. Tapi sebenarnya belajar bahasa ni memang macam tu. You kena accident, jatuh, masuk longkang, tak apa. Just be at it.
Carry on lah.
Practice makes perfect. Yeah.
So I absolutely agree with it. Thank you very much, Prof, for that response. Any other question that we can answer? The last question, because we're almost at the end of our session today. We don't have and please don't forget to fill in your attendance, everyone. The link to the attendance form is inside our chat box, right? Thank you very much, Prof. Rogayah, for your great insights and for your time, of course. I have learned a lot of things this afternoon. As I informed you just now, I am not well versed in this area, but I believe that this is an interesting area to look at. Right, thank you so very much.
Saya, Cik Syafiq, kalau dibenarkan, saya nak ucapkan terima kasih lah kerana berjemput saya. Terima kasih kepada penganjur terutama kepada Dr. Camelia kerana telah menjejak saya di LinkedIn dan menjemput saya, dan saya sangat berbesar hati sebenarnya dijemput. I'm happy to share, and I hope I have inspired some people to actually try to explore the area of psycholinguistics. It's very exciting actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you have, definitely, right? Thank you so very much once again, Dr. Rogayah. So, well, ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up our sharing session today. And on behalf of the organizing committee, thank you so very much for your participation, for making time in your busy schedules this afternoon to join us. God bless all of you. And this has been a presentation of Academy of Language Studies, Uitm Perak Branch. And it has been a pleasure to moderate today's session. Thank you so very much. Please enjoy the rest of the day. Assalamualaikum. Bye-bye.
Waalaikumsalam.
Thank you very much, Prof.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.
If you are still in, can we have photo session? I am so terribly sorry for missing that. All right, if you may, if you could switch on your camera and we can have a photo session, please. I am so sorry I have missed that. Kamalia, are you going to take the picture, Kamalia? Thank you so very much. Thank you so very much. All right, please switch on your camera if you are still in. Thank you so very much. All right. Are we done, Kamalia?
The first slide and then the second one.
All right.
Okay, the third. And that's all. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you so very much.
See you around.
See you, inshallah.